startups don't die from homicide, they die from suicide. If you don't get people to really fast find value for what you do, and you have to overly sell a product, I think you're off to a very difficult start. The sales equation. And I like that way of thinking. Like thinking about the company as an equation, there are a bunch of unknowns, and what you're trying to do is that you're trying to establish some patterns. Don't try to optimize it. You can't optimize an equation while you're figuring out what the heck that equation is. Startup is really a momentum game. It's not an optimization game. If you focus on what's right ahead of you, you'll be looking down. People say, oh, there's money left on the table with this customer. Who cares? There's a million customers out there. Who cares if you leave 10% of money on the table? That's not the point.
So, Magnus, thank you so much for joining this podcast. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for having me.
So you have a tremendous experience in managing companies. You have started, I think, like 20 years ago from BCG and consulting companies. Then you moved to sitting on the board, and now you're managing a product company. So what do you think is like success, like traits of successful company, which is built on the product?
There are a lot of people that are really good at building a product, but not building a company, and they will struggle after some time. And there are a lot of people that are really good at building companies who not really good at building products, and they will also struggle, I think, more immediately, but definitely over time. In the beginning, a startup is a product. The product is the startup. As you grow, and now we are 150 people and tens of millions in ARR, the company is my product. Of course, I also run product at Sanity, and I'm very involved in product development and sometimes down to feature level, but I try to stay more abstract, because I think that's one of the benefits of having better overview as a CEO, and let people who are closer to the execution deal with the more detailed choices. They could be better at that. But if you don't get people to really fast find value for what you do, and you have to overly sell a product, I think you're off to a very difficult start. But of course, it depends on what the scale. To me, building a product, to me, building a company means building a company that could be worth billions of dollars listed on the New York Stock Exchange. Just because that's the hardest thing you can do when you're building a company. Building a product could be many things. It could be inside a company. It could be the company itself. Some people build companies, they have ambitions that are lower, quote unquote, than ours, which is totally fine. You should just be very cognizant of what you're trying to do. And if you really want to conquer the world, then I think it's beneficial to have that in the back of your mind early on. What's the shape of this company? What should you prioritize? How would this kind of play out as a business? How would this company development story play out? I don't think that could ever substitute a good product. But they say the best product doesn't always win. If you over-focus on making the product good, but you don't really understand how you're going to get it out to people, then you're dead. You're not going to make it work. There are a lot of great products that were made in the wrong time or just the wrong execution. There's this famous meme from, what's his name, Khan, from 2018, where it says, first-time founders obsess about product, second-time founders obsess about go-to-market. And internally, I have this joke about third-time founders obsess about the organization. Because at the end of the day, it's really the organization that's going to build the product. So I have this slide where I show a rocket, where it's product, go-to-market, and organization that I use often internally. And product is the whole foundation. You could do a good business on a mediocre product, even a bad product, but I don't think it will be as good, as large. I think it's a limited potential. Also, it's not so fun. We have, Sanity has, in the last quarter, we had 97% gross revenue retention. It means that basically nobody's leaving our product, right? And that's because it's a really good product that is really engineered in order for people to get value efficiently out of it. And we also try to sell it to people in the right use cases. What we decided very early on was to follow what's called a product-led growth motion. So effectively, we just throw it out on the internet and see who pops up. And we did this then when we launched. We actually launched it while it was still the agency in November 2017. It was launched. I was already kind of there working with my co-founders, but we haven't moved it over to a new company yet. And we were just obsessed about who came on board, who were trying to use it, and whether you were working for Burger King or you were working for a church in Milwaukee, we kind of didn't care. Well, of course, understand that that's a difference and that they have different revenue potential over time, these two users. But their immediate reactions when using your software may not be different, or the value in their feedback may not be that big of a difference. And actually, the person who sits in a church in Milwaukee or people who work for small businesses, they often have much less time in order to decide, or they have less patience in order to deciding whether it's a good software or not. Whilst enterprise users are often like pushed on a big product and they just have to use it. So they would learn it over time and maybe like it. So actually going out to a market in a smaller business is I think very advantageous. And that is how we build it. But back to this like product and company, when I say product, go-to-market, organization, go-to-market and organization is clear company building. Well, product is product building. And I think both of them are extremely important, but if you don't have a very intentional approach on how you're going to market, as long as you start getting some product market fit, then it's very hard to experiment. What are you trying to figure out? What kind of patterns are you trying to establish inside your company? And when would you know whether you should put more resources, back off the resources, or change it up? A lot of people try this product-led growth motion, but don't get it to work. And then they substitute it for a sales motion, which I think could be easier to kick off, especially in the early days when the co-founders are selling. There's some magic pixie dust in a co-founder trying to sell a product, and you've been thinking so much about it. Of course you can sell it. Selling for a couple of $1 million ARR on the back of a co-founder is probably less, or is much less impressive than managing to take people off the street who maybe have some prior knowledge about your industry, but not about your product, and then training them to go out and convince people that this is good. And then making sure that's implemented so that the customers afterwards go and say, this is amazing. If you get that chain to work, you're starting to build a company on the back of a good product. And our VP of sales, CK, he always talks about the sales equation. And I like that way of thinking, like thinking about the company as an equation. There are a bunch of unknowns. And what you're trying to do is that you're trying to establish some patterns and facts about these unknowns. And I often say internally, don't try to optimize it. You can't optimize an equation while you're figuring out what the heck that equation is. So when building the company, you need to figure out what is really happening here. How is this working? So often when we talk about what's the cost of our sales qualified opportunities, I'll go like, I don't really care. Before we can say, here's a pattern that is repeatable, that we actually need to learn, because otherwise you're just optimizing. And I think most people, if you're good at building your company, you don't optimize the company too early. A startup is really a momentum game. It's not an optimization game. There's so much opportunity out there, especially if you have a decent sized market, which you should if you want to go big with a startup. If you focus on what's right ahead of you, you'll be looking down. People say, oh, there's money left on the table with this customer. Who cares? There's 1 million customers out there. Who cares if you leave 10% of money on the table? That's not the point.
Yeah, I actually like Elon Musk suggested what is their approach about optimization. You will start with deleting steps. Like, first of all, you need to audit what you have, then delete steps, then optimize that, and then automate. And actually, I think that's the right way to setting up processes. Like, first you need to know what you need to do and then optimize it. And actually a good question about scalability of business, because there are so many parts of operations that are forming the company, like from hiring people, because building product is just like one piece of that. And there is so much on the back end. And orchestrating all of that and keeping up the pace of scaling and growing is really important, to not to overinvest in one area, like investing in sales, while we cannot keep up with other parts of our business, and or moving too fast with product without keeping up with sales. So you need to be orchestrating all of that, keeping your eyes on every part of the business, and just progressing step by step, I think. Like another question about leading business is how you make decisions, because you mentioned that like you need to decide what's important. Do you have any framework that you use at Sanity to decide what is important? Because I remember Jeff Bezos, he had, like, when he started Amazon, he had a framework about minimizing regret. He thought if he will regret with some decision. And do you have any framework? Because managing a company is always about making decisions. So do you have any approach to deal with that?
Good question. I don't think I have a great framework. I think I like some frameworks that I use. I think this framework of like a 1 minute decision, a 1 day decision, or a 1 week decision is a really good way of thinking. So it's really about a little bit like thinking fast and slow. What are you trying to do here? And that's a framework that I probably apply without. I don't say here's the framework. Now I'm going to spend 1 week on this decision, but I'll say that decision doesn't matter right now. I think in a startup, you have this saying that it's better to make, or in any company, it's better to make a decision move fast than rather change your decision later. I 100% subscribe to that. Though you have to think about what you are really trying to decide. Yeah, so there are a couple of frameworks. So that framework, I think, is good. It enables you to be intentional, which is one of my favorite words. What are you trying to do here? Be intentional. Try to be strategic. And strategy to me is not like the big corporate strategy. Is you're reflecting on what you're trying to get out of something. Whether you're a developer making a decision on a code, or you're a salesperson making a decision on the deal, etc., or you're the CEO making the decision on behalf of the company. Am I trying to decide something here that is that I really should think about? And how do you consider whether it's a 1 minute decision or a 1 week decision or a 1 day decision, etc.? One of the first things that I would do is to say, is there a no regret here? Is there so it could be a revolving door or a two-way door. So would my choice now lock me in, or can I change that choice if I made the wrong decision? It's like this joke about if you're asked a 50-50 question, just go and answer it, because you look very smart in 50% of the situations instead of just thinking about it. Because yeah, it's 50-50, you're not going to nail it anyhow. But it's a little bit like that. If you have a decision that is a little bit 50-50, but you can reverse it, go ahead, make a decision. And I tell my colleagues all the time, make a decision. Don't be afraid of making a mistake. But we have to fix our mistakes. We have to talk about them. We have to learn about them. And that's very uncomfortable often. And that sort of uncomfort is something you have to embrace in an organization. If you just say, trust is one of our core values. If you have trust, without that accountability and that ability to sit down and introspect your mistakes and painfully learn from them, because for most people that's pretty painful. At least it is for me. I think that's a good way to think about it. So you need to decide. There are a couple of other things that I think I apply, although I haven't written this out. Is that who is the first question to ask when there's a problem to solve, or a question or a decision to be made? The first question you should have is who should make this decision, not what is the answer. And I think a lot of people do the mistake of jumping to try to answer the question instead of asking who would be best positioned to answer that question. That may be Rachel, my SVP of engineering. She's great. She may be much more qualified than me to make that decision, or she may be much more qualified to continue executing along the path of that decision. Maybe we're equally good to make the decision, but she should be the one to own it. She should be the one to correct it, because she would see if it's wrong, etc., etc. So who should own the decision, I think is tremendously important. And then there is this framework. By the way, I must say, I also really love, if you've read anything about principles, Ray Dalio. Ray Dalio talks about principles, and he writes down all his decisions, and then the outcome, and then the principle on which he made his decision. And this is something that has helped me from time to time, although I don't use it systematically. I don't write down all my decisions, but it says all your decisions probably come down to a pattern of 10 main decisions. So what you have to do if you have a decision in front of you, you have to be able to qualify which of these 10 decisions is it. And then what is the methodology I use to find the best answer? And how is my track record on that decision? That's a very structured approach. Ray Dalio is he's a weird guy, but he's very fascinating and he's been extremely successful. And if you read his book, Principles, you'd be amazed by he does a lot of strange things inside Bridgewater, but of course it's been massively successful. But I think that's also a good approach. And this one about who should make the decision, that's from $1 Trillion Coach, a book written by Eric Schmidt about Bill Campbell, famous coach in Silicon Valley. So I like that. But maybe the thing that we use the most and internally we structure up and we talk about that I would recommend others to use is what we call the SCQA framework. The SCQA framework, it stands for situation, complication, question, and answer. This is a method invented by Barbara Minto, who's super famous, but maybe in smaller circles. She was, I think, if not the first, one of the first consultants, female consultants at McKinsey. She was definitely one of the first females to ever go to Harvard Business School. And she wrote this book called, I think when she was at McKinsey, she wrote this book called Pyramid Principle. And there's a lot to that book. And I've learned this mainly from a presentation Michael Daring, a former current investor, former eBay executive, had. This is actually the first, I moved to the Bay Area 5 years ago from Norway. This is the first meetup I went to. And Michael Daring was there, and he's very impressive. And he spoke about it's called executive communication. You find it on Heavybit if you want to look it up. An amazing presentation, probably just 15 minutes. But what it teaches you is this pyramid principle, and quite a bit simplified in Michael Daring's form, and that's how I learned it. Situation, and this shapes out as a memo that you often write. It could be 4 lines, one for the S, one for the C, one for the Q, one for the A, or it could be 4 pages. But it's a framework for let you organize your thoughts and be intentional on what you're trying to do. So, situation. That's the undisputed facts about the situation. The stuff we can all agree on. Complication. What is really the problem here, right? And often it is about figuring out the problem, not the answer, because if we don't agree on the problem, we're never going to agree on the answer. So the complication in the SCQA is the biggest, most important thing to nail, and that's where you should spend your time. The question part should only be, what should we do about it? Doesn't have to be anything more. Because that's where you kind of make it conflicting. Focus on the complication, not on the question. And then the answer, sometimes in our SCQAs internally, that could be blank and say, we have to discuss this. I need to discuss this complication with you all. Or it could be a proposed answer to it. If you follow the Barbara Minto pyramid principle, there's a structured way of arguing your answer. It's like, here's what we should do. Here's the supporting arguments of facts. Here's what we should do, supporting arguments of facts. A fascinating book. I think I read half of it. It's a lot of learning. I should probably pick it up again. One of our values is let fires burn. Because there are a bunch of things you can decide, but do you have to? Is it a blocker that you need to decide to move forward or create clarity? And if it's not, what are you trying to spend time on? So, especially in a startup, there are a lot of fires, and there are a lot of people. Especially the more people you add, and a lot of people seem to think that number of employees is a good KPI for your success with a startup. So as much as you can afford, you just add people onto it. And we've done that as well. And with mixed success, oftentimes we had to reverse things because we didn't really know, we weren't intentional in what we're trying to solve, how we're trying to solve it. And I think that's natural. But number of people in your company is not a KPI. It's an easy way to explain the size of your company, but really doesn't say anything. I remember the day we hired internal tax people, tax lawyers at EQT Partners. Tax is an important part of private equity because you have so complicated financial structures. You want to avoid suboptimal double taxation. That's kind of the simple. A lot of people think it's like avoid taxation altogether. No, the money will be taxed. But I'm not going to take that fight. But once we got internal people on tax, we started having a lot of tax reporting. And I am 100% sure that was not stage appropriate for the size of the company at that point. But once we hired a couple of people to run tax, then there was a lot of focus on tax. The exact same thing would happen in any company. If you hire someone to focus on account-based marketing, you get a lot of account-based marketing talk. If you hire someone to focus on this, you will get a lot of that.
If you have a plumber, everything becomes a nail everywhere.
Yeah, exactly. And even more so, it's like you hire them to solve this problem, so they're going to work all day on solving that problem. Nobody's going to say, hey, the problem you hired me to solve was a half a position problem, so I'm going to stop looking at that problem. Can I look at something else? Can I go over here and fix something else? Well, some people do that, and they are A-plus players. Those are the ones you want to employ. But it also makes it, this I would say is predictable. And you were asking about frameworks, and we didn't talk about this framework that we use, but that's more an alignment framework, it's not a decision framework. But we use something invented by Salesforce that is called V2MOM. It's values, vision, methods, obstacles, and measures. It is very similar to OKRs that Google invented. No, sorry, Intel invented. Google maybe made them more famous, but it was invented inside Intel. OKRs are very numbers driven, and they could come across more as tasks. It's really about how you apply them. I don't think any system is better than the other. I have a good friend and a person who was very close at advising me through this period. That was former CEO of Heroku, and it used V2MOM because that was owned by Salesforce. So I use that. It's a little bit more verbose. It tells more about the vision. I decided to run this more as a alignment tool in terms of saying, what are we trying to achieve here? What are the 5? This year we have 5. It varies. We've had 8, we've had 6, we've had 5. What are the 5 methods that is going to take us to the next level? What are we trying to achieve? And then each of them have obstacles and measures. And there could be various teams responsible for these measures. But we have articulated and expressed what we're trying to achieve. And those 5 things that we have this year, everyone in the company should know. Those 5 things are what you should do. And if you're working on something different, there are a million smart things we could do. I don't think a startup is limited by its opportunities. It's very often, in the company building sense, not in the product sense, it's limited by its execution to focus on the right things. And really to pick those battles where you think you can make order of magnitude improvement from what you have today. And that's something that we spend a lot of time talking about, thinking about when we have our QBRs, our quarterly business reviews with core management. Just had one a couple of weeks ago. It's fantastic. Sometimes we do them on Zoom. Sometimes we go to a place. We went to the small hotel, nice but not fancy, in Half Moon Bay, and we spent a couple of days together. We always go for a walk in the morning, like 6:30. We go out to get fresh air and just talk, and then we sit down and we go through our V2MOM. How are we doing? What are we going to do going forward? We use the V2MOM. When the V2MOM is working, and this is like Salesforce learning. When the V2MOM is working, that's your only tool for measuring progress and thinking ahead. And that's been very successful for us. We really liked it. It may change over time. I think everything is a question of what stage appropriate for you. And so far that has served us really well. Maybe in the future, if someone wants a tip, there's a good book called Traction. Traction is a book about how you build an operating system for your company. How do you build like frameworks and thinking around running your company? And I don't think Traction is good because that approach would be like perfect. I haven't tried exactly what they do in Traction, but I do think that it raises your awareness and it makes you much more intentional on what are you trying to do and how are you doing it. And then you find your own way of running it. But at least you recognize the need for having such a framework in order to be intentional on running a company and building a company that hopefully you'll make bigger and bigger and achieve your goals. That I think for a startup, goals should always be 10x what you have today. That's a very easy way to think about, like, how fast can we do 10x what we do today?
So the last question I would like to wrap up, like we have a standard section about feature/future. So we're talking about AI. Basically, we would like our guests to share their vision about how AI fits into their industry, and how do you see AI will impact CMS market and industry in overall? Because currently there are technologies, machine learning / AI algorithms that allow to create content on the go. You can create personalized experience, websites, and different content. And do you feel threatened by AI, or it'll be kind of a supplementary feature for your business and product? And how do you see this industry will evolve in a couple of years?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think definitely is an opportunity, is not a threat. AI is going to be everywhere and enhance the way we work in all different shapes and forms. The CMS industry has historically been extremely web-centric. And for us, content is really about having a platform of content that can serve all your different needs. So whether you have an app or a website, or you have a web app, or you have an internal app, the point is that when you're going to make content strategic, you need to control that body of content. You need to understand what it is. You need to be able to parse it. You need to be able to work with it with machines and people together collaboratively. And you need to be able to distribute it every way you want. This is how we set out building Sanity when we started. This is what Sanity has always been about, and structured content. Now, back then, it was very hard to pull structured content or pull some meaning out of unstructured content. Most CMS system, which is a pile of Word documents. And of course, that has changed. Now, that doesn't mean that for a large organization, you could just do whatever. There needs to be frameworks for the company in terms of how they communicate, what they're trying to do, reusability. And I think we're running into this period where, because of AI, there'll be more than ever. We already went to like the consumerization of content, where everybody could write content and share it. So we got a lot of noise from that. Imagine all the noise we now are going to get. I remember this guy was totally slayed on LinkedIn. He showed like a bot where you can just click and it would answer a bunch of LinkedIn things for you. And everybody's like, what piece of crap software is that? Nobody wants that. It's just noise. You need to take the power of these LLMs and help them, and we already done that in terms of helping you do chores. That's what we released a year ago in our AI Assist. We just released now in May, we released a fantastic product called Create, sanity.io/create, and is really a writing assistant that enables you to be more creative using AI in a different approach. It's a novel approach to writing with AI. I think there's a long way to go still on these things. But I do know that, especially for the larger organizations, you need to control your communication. You need to understand your communication. So you can't just let AI free. So there'll be a lot of good collaboration. The content platform will be even more important, because what has happened in parallel is that we've gone from these very isolated systems to a world where things are more connected. And the best companies are deploying technology and developers at scale. So it's the same way as developers won't go anywhere. They'll become more efficient. They would probably change the way of working. Like CMSs won't go anywhere. They'll become more efficient. They'll become engineering platforms instead of being marketing platforms. I think the marketing track for CMS, it's a big market. It will continue to be a big market, but it has a lot of headwinds, I think, in terms of the whole logic of how that's set up.
Yeah. And a really fast round of like up to 30-second answers to a few questions.
That's hard for me. I'll be fast. Okay.
What is your favorite quote?
Startups don't die from homicide, they die from suicide. So to explain that, obviously, you are your own success. When startups say it's like, oh, I can't tell anyone, someone else will do this, like, cut the crap. Like, build the software, do what you want to do, believe in your own way of creating your success. Don't be customer obsessed. No, but don't be competitor obsessed, be customer obsessed.
What book influenced your product and business vision the most?
Oh, there's so many. The first book, Hard Thing About Hard Things by Ben Horowitz, was like an amazing start. That's a great book. but it's so hard. I mentioned Principles, a fantastic book, $1 Trillion Coach. There's so many.
If you would be able to switch roles with anyone in your company for a day, who would it be and why?
Probably the solution engineers, to really go in and look under the hood. I wouldn't be qualified. I'm a noob developer. I'm not good enough to do their job. They're amazing, but I would do that because I could be out in the field with the customers that actually build with the product. And I do that in other ways to compensate, but I would take that job for a day. I would take many jobs for a day, but that's the one I think of first.
Yeah, that's great. And the last one, what product gave you the best experience ever?
After 15 years, like forever, I don't use it anymore, but like my favorite through all times has been Excel, because you could just build and automate and you could program in Excel. I learned later that programming in JavaScript is very similar to just a different mindset than building it in Excel. And the fact is that is either right or wrong. It's kind of the same as programming is either right or wrong. And 15 years in finance, that's where I spent my time and was most productive. But I don't use it anymore, unfortunately.
Yeah, there is a rumor that entire financial system is built on Excel. So
it is, and now maybe Google Sheets, and for a good reason. It is. Oftentimes when people want to build something and then they can say, oh, we're going to build this little software how about if you can't show to me how you do that process in Excel, I'm not going to let you invest in that product. It doesn't make sense. Either buy a product or build a product. It doesn't make sense. So yeah. And of course I use Google Sheets a lot, but I don't build like the amazing automated models that I used to do when I was more of an analyst in banking, etc. But yeah, that's an amazing tool, and probably just getting a lot better now with AI. But again, I don't use it as much.
Yeah. So yeah, we can wrap up. Magnus, it was amazing conversation. There are so many things that I think I will use in my projects right now about decision making. And I have one thing when I would use this framework that you mentioned.
I got a bonus one for you at the end. I totally forgot. This, if you ask people, is the thing I say a lot. There's no such thing as an unprioritized list. Every list you come up with has a prioritization. So when often people say, oh, but this is not really how I would prioritize. Yes, it is. It's your subconscious prioritization, because that's how you wrote it out. And then you have to become more intentional about it. So there's no point having bullet lists. Might as well give them numbers. There is no such thing as an unprioritized list.
Yeah, true.
Thank you. Nice chatting. Thank you for having me.
Have a great day and have a nice weekend.
Likewise. Thanks. Bye.